Good morning.
Good morning.
Did you have a good week in the Lord?
Yeah.
Did you let your vexation turn into wrath?
Yeah.
John's grinning ear to ear. He must have won that victory. We spoke about that last time, as you remember. And that's hard to do, to pray for the wicked, the sons of Belial. God don't deal with the wicked. He doesn't correct them. My wife, we don't like to be corrected, do we? My wife corrects me. She told me, she said, when you get up there, read a little slower. I'm a speed reader. I remember Mom and Dad came home from parent-teacher conference one day. My dad walked in the door. He said, "Son, how do you do it?" Well, I started going in my mind through all the list of things he didn't know I'd done, trying to figure out what he's matched up with here. And I said, "What do you mean, how do I do it?" He said, "That teacher says you can read 220 words a minute with 95% comprehension." And she said she's never seen that before. And I thought everybody does it. So when I get up here reading, my mind gets ahead of my tongue, and I stutter and stammer a little bit. But anyway, she told me reminded me this morning. She said, "Slow down." I thought, we don't like to be corrected, do we? We don't. Whom the Lord loveth, He chasteneth. Hebrews 12:6, I think it is, and scourgeth all new sons. We like to look at Romans 12, where it says, "Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated." What did he do to Esau? What did he do to Esau? Nothing. He let Esau run wild and die in his sin. What did he do to Jacob? He beat the tar out of him. Those bands, they get tight. I ain't got away from that yet, brother. And I'm glad they're there. It's made me appreciate them and recognize them and know that is whom the Lord loveth, He chasteneth, and that I'm not a son of Belial. There's something there that restrains me. And I have to do as Donald said, I have to command my soul to rejoice in that. And here we're going to look at the mighty men that served under David. One in particular, Eleazar. These men, these last few verses here mention about 37 different men that served in David's house. You remember, there were 400 men that came out to Adullam. And it said these men were in despair, discontent, and in debt. Sounds like me spiritually when I wound up at the end of a dirt road out here. A dead end. Yeah, desperate. You're right, brother. I was. I was about to do what I'd done before, just give up. And we're going to see in these verses here what Eleazar did. Let's start here. Let's see. And I've turned to the wrong place. Wouldn't you know it? Give me a second here. We're going to go to 2 Samuel 23. I was in 1 Samuel, about to get called out by John there. I knew that didn't look familiar. I was like, well, what have I got done here? In verse 8 here, these be the names of the mighty men whom David had, the Tachmonite, that sat in the seat, chief among the captains. The same was Adino, the Eznite. He lifted up his spear against 800 whom he slew at one time. And after him was Eleazar, the son of Dodo, the Ahohite, one of the three mighty men with David, when they defied the Philistines that were there gathered together to battle, and the men of Israel were gone away. You ever had to stand alone? Now we know in First Chronicles 11, we won't go over there, but the Philistines had gathered here in a barley field. They were going to take this barley field, and all the men have fled away. And here is Eleazar. Listen, this is a matter of life and death here. This ain't having a flat tire on the way to work. This ain't getting caught by a train on the way to work. This ain't some circumstance, some unexpected financial bill come in. This man's surrounded. He's about to lose his life. But watch what he does here. Everybody else is abandoning. Everybody's abandoning. So what does he do? he arose and smote the Philistines until his hand was weary, and his hand clave unto the sword. And the Lord wrought a great victory that day. And the people returned after the victory. You ever had that before? After you've defeated it, they all show back up. And the people returned after him only to spoil. His hand was weary, but yet his hand clave with the sword. Listen, like I said, when we came to the end of this dirt road down here, I was weary. Weary. I'm about ready to let go of that sword, Brother Harold. Here's the man here that fought to the bitter end. And what happened? God wrought a great victory. God wrought a great victory. Now, we're not told that we're supposed to take on the whole armor of God and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of the Lord. What do we have in our hand to fight with? Listen, he had one weapon here. And he was in the right place at the right time. God put him here. A lot of times when we're defeated, we start our own battles. That's what I was talking about last week. We get all that wrath built up from vexation. And like I said, God either restrains the wicked or he destroys the wicked. He don't correct them. He didn't correct Esau. He let him go. Listen, this out here, this is as good as it's going to get for them. Now the Lord restrains them, like I said, or he destroys them. And that's what happened here. He destroyed them. So when you feel those bands, you feel that correction, we should thank God. I'd never seen this before. Whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth. Just let Esau go. I've seen my friends just let go. As the brother prayed this morning, now I'm going to start praying for mercy on them. Because if they're not corrected, they're going to be destroyed. Just like he said previously about the sons of Belial with the thorns. These Philistines here, listen, this wasn't the first time they showed up in this area. This is the proximate area where Goliath came out. And that brings another point to mind, setting examples by engaging in the battle, having your sword in your hand and hanging on to it. Listen, my daddy has served the Lord all his life. I've seen him weary and tired, but listen, him and that sword are one, just like Eliezer here. That sword became a part of him. He couldn't turn it loose. David, in the first part of this chapter, remember we talked about the word was on his tongue. It was in his tongue. It was a part of him. Listen, this spiritual battle here, the devil's he'll be back. If you win a victory, they'll return. The same area, they returned again. I've told y'all before, not to pick on y'all about music, but I battle that with music. I'll defeat it for a while, and the devil will come back up. Hey, if you just listen to that for a little bit, it ain't going to hurt. What's it going to hurt? Well, I'll tell you what it hurts. It takes my mind off of him. So I personally don't indulge in that. Set an example. Listen, they had seen David defeat the Philistines with God on their side. And I believe that gave him the courage to do this. That's what I want to impress on us today. Let's set an example that the battle is the Lord's and this stuff can be defeated so that others will be encouraged. Do we do that? Are we familiar with our sword? You think this is the first time he'd wielded that sword? You think he'd ever practiced with it? And his hand clave to it, so he could not turn it loose. It's been said from here before, if you can go away, you will. He couldn't turn it loose till he had utterly destroyed this thing. Listen, when you put your hand to the plow and don't look back. Churchill said, if you're going through hell, keep going. And there's a lot of truth in that. Our faith must outlast the silence of God. Them 3 Hebrew children didn't hear from God till they got in the furnace. This man here, God didn't show up till he had that sword out. Like, Errol Flynn? No, that might have been. I've got them mixed up there. Listen, take the sword of the Lord in hand. Practice with it. Get to know your weapon. So when the devil shows up, the Lord will be wrought a great victory. This man is a no-name. I'm a no-name. Most of us here, who knows us? We're not, but I don't, listen, I don't have to be. I'm like Abraham. I can commune with the Creator. I know whenever I take up my sword to defeat the devil and he wants to remind me of all my familiar pets, I can remind him of Calvary. Well, there's a man there that didn't turn loose. He was weary, but he pressed on. He hung between heaven and hell for me and wrought a great victory. Listen, there's some things worth fighting for. And it ain't politics. It ain't this temporal stuff. Melissa, we were talking about my brother yesterday. He's doing really good. Talked about all the prayers that went up for him. Listen, I had to take up the sword. I had to sacrifice time to pray. I had to sacrifice the things Clay wanted to do to wield that sword and hang on to it. That's what's worth fighting for. Not who's going to be president for 4 years. That's what we're... So what are you fighting with this morning? Have you got the good old sword? Or have you got a new one? I mean, that's something worth fighting for. You know, this good old Bible's been abandoned for these new versions, new news for modern monkey. These swords are easier to use. I ain't turning loose of this one. They'll pry it out of my hand. Because I have determined to know this. Listen, there's some things worth fighting for. Eliezer here decided this was worth fighting for. Listen, these were men, rejects. And look what God did with them. God's weapon in the hands of God's man. If God be for us, who can be against us? Whatever happened to Philippians 4:13? I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. Listen, Monday's coming. Monday's coming. What you got in your hand when the devil shows up? Now, I know we're supposed to have our feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace, but they just some things the enemy ain't going to relent on. There's a time to fight. So this week as we go through, listen, take some time to get to know your sword. It takes practice. Listen, this wasn't his first time grabbing that sword up, I assure you. But remember, when you're weary and tired, me and the brother was talking about, when we get up here, a lot of times we don't know what to do. The Lord has to speak through us. And listen, that's some of the best times, is when you ain't got nothing, because He has to do it. But you got to be on the battlefield. I ain't going to win this on the couch. What if I'd stayed home this morning? What if I hadn't commanded my soul to get out of bed? Fight the fight that's worth fighting for. I love you. May the Lord bless you this coming week.